What's good?
All good, man. Having a good week.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good.
You?
Good. Yeah, I'm good, man. Like, I see you've been traveling and whatnot.
Working hard.
Yeah.
GCC.
Yeah.
We're regional, baby.
Love that. Love that. Love that.
Today, we have such a wonderful guest, a beautiful woman inside and out, a true trailblazer within her field. I don't even want to give too much away. I want her to introduce herself.
Yeah.
I think.
Let's do it. Welcome to the Steps I Took podcast, Emaan Abbas.
Woo!
Did I pronounce it?
Yeah,
right?
that was perfect.
Yeah, okay,
Did you rehearse that?
No.
Yeah.
A little bit.
You practiced a bit.
Yeah.
Doing your research. Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, thanks for coming. Good to get you on here and like get your story and stuff, because I think like it's a story that needs to be told, you know, and I'm sure it will inspire people. So
we like to ask all of our guests the first question, just to break the ice. What has been the best part of your week so far?
Oh, gosh. Oh, my goodness. Best part of the week. Well, it's summer in Dubai right now, so obviously I'm indoors most of the time. I think the best part of this week is probably I had dinner with a friend last night, and it was really nice. Like, we got an opportunity to kind of sit back and look at the last 6 months of life and kind of catch up on a bunch of stuff that has happened. And it was really nice because I often have these moments where it's like, oh, am I being productive enough? Am I accomplishing enough? Like, did I set out to do everything that I said that I was going to do? Like, did I actually accomplish it? And it was nice to sit with someone and have them really point out what those things are for me. And I'm very grateful for this person, for doing that, for being in my life, but also, yeah, it was like very special and nice to hear it from someone else. Sometimes we forget how much we do in life, you know? And so, yeah, my dinner with a friend was probably my brightest spot.
That sounds beautiful. It's so nice that you have a friend around you that is able to remind you of just how great you are and all that you're achieving.
I'm very lucky.
it's important to have friends like that. I think, you know, like you said, sometimes we can just self-doubt our accomplishments and stuff, and sometimes it just takes that one person to be like, yo, no, like, you smashed it, you know, keep going, you know.
Yeah.
So.
And to be able to do that for each other, I think is important. Like, it was very much like an exchange, you know, where we got to hold the mirror up to one another's faces. And yeah, I'm very lucky. I have a good tribe around me.
Yeah.
I love that.
Nice. Yeah. Emaan, what's your background like? For, you know, people might be listening, hearing the accent, or might be watching and looking at you and trying to work out where you're from, and what's your background?
Yeah. So obviously I'm American. I grew up in California, to be specific, but I am originally Egyptian. My parents immigrated to the States in the late 70s, I would say. And so I was born and raised in California. So when people ask me, you know, like, where are you from? Yes, I very much say I am Egyptian American. The Egyptian comes first because it's like at the core of who I am. But I also am very American, very American too. Do you want me to go like way back, like childhood, where I grew up and stuff?
Yeah, let's
go there. Yeah. Let's go there. I grew up in a little tiny country town, like country, south of the San Francisco Bay Area. And when people think of the Bay Area, it's very much known for its like diversity, and it's very much like a melting pot and very forward thinking, and like Silicon Valley and all of that. My hometown is not like that. It's like very much the opposite. It's like on the outskirts of all that diversity and, you know, forward thinking. It's called Hollister. And growing up, I think I resented growing up in a town like that, just because I was very different. We were one of the only Arab, Middle Eastern families in the town. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone knew each other's business. And I grew up feeling very other. And I think when I was younger, I resented it. But now when I go back, I realize like how quaint and, you know, a lot of the values that are instilled in me that I have carried with me throughout my life. And it's very much because of not only my like Egyptian Muslim upbringing, but also like my very Hollister country core values.
Yeah. So am I right in saying you grew up in quite a strict Muslim home?
Yes.
So
Very.
how did that have an impact on you when you were trying to be this young American girl in a Western world?
Yeah. I've been asked this question a lot, and I think a lot of it is because of, or forms of this question, a lot of it is because what I've set out to do, like in my life, completely goes against what my cultural and religious, religious norms were. But I think growing up in such a strict household was really tough for me. I now realize that, my parents were just desperately trying to cling on to the only culture that they knew. They grew up, they moved to this whole new world, and they brought, the values and the norms from where they were from. And I think that there was an element of fear. They did not want my sister and I to veer too far off the path. Yeah. And I think that's why a lot, the rules and the regulations, a lot of that stemmed from a fear of us losing that essence of where we came from.
Did you resist a lot when you were young then?
Yeah.
You rebelled or?
I did. I feel like I was a good girl, but I questioned a lot.
Yeah.
I think when I was younger, I just kind of went along with it, but I was always quite headstrong, even as like a little girl. But I think in my teen years, it kind of shifted into this like rebellious spirit. My mom would always say to me, like, damn, do you always have to like touch that fire to feel it burn? Like, why can't you just listen to what we're saying or the advice we're trying to give you? And it's like, no, I just got to figure it out for myself. And I think that's always been a part of me and will always be a part of me, but I really struggled with it. Like, I very much resented my culture, my religion, and I almost tried to like reject it growing up because of how much it was imposed on us.
No, I can imagine. And what, in terms of like, were there any sort of expectations for you as a young Muslim girl, both in terms of education and in terms of, like what was expected to be done for you as, you came into womanhood, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, I think from I feel like any brown household, Arab household, like child of immigrants, like we all have this experience where it's like you go to school, you get good grades, you come home right after school or right after the sports that you play. Like I couldn't do the things that all of my friends were doing, like prom, dances. I mean, I eventually like demanded it and got to go my senior year.
You got your prom date in the end, yeah?
I got to go to prom. My parents were were chaperones. It was so embarrassing. But yeah, there were just a lot of things that was not allowed to do. I think for me, something that I really struggled with was this coming into, my womanhood. Like I was very curious about my body. I was very curious about boys. I was very curious about all of these things that I was feeling. And the topic of sex, periods, these concepts of things that you start to like get really curious about in your teen years. It's not necessarily something that we talked about in our household. And it's something that I think it almost backfired. Like I became very curious about those things. And I think I don't want to like overgeneralize, but I feel like every Arab girl, every Muslim girl kind of leads like almost like a double life. Like I lied a lot. And I'm not proud of it. But it was the only way that I was going to be able to experience the things that I was very curious about was by lying to my parents and almost having like a double life at times. And later that evolved and changed. And I can explain a bit more about that. But yeah, I feel like it almost backfired and I became too curious.
But then it made you who you are today.
Right.
Got you to where you are today.
Right.
Which is amazing.
Right. And I think I'm very grateful for my parents and my family. I feel like if I didn't have those, the rules and the regulations of like going to school, getting a great education, like making something of yourself, I probably wouldn't have accomplished everything that I have. There were probably things that I could have avoided or done differently, but I'm grateful for what my parents tried to do. I'm also grateful for my curious and rebellious spirit, because I think that it allowed me to kind of forge my own path and do it in a way that felt authentic to me.
Yeah. So how did you weigh or balance the expectations with not disappointing? Because obviously, even when our parents enforce things on us, we still love them and we still want to not impress them, but we still want to prove ourselves and make sure that they're happy with everything that we do and for them to be proud of us. And obviously, growing up in a strict home, they have certain expectations. So I'm sure you don't want to disappoint them, but you also still want to have freedom.
Right. Yeah, I think that had always been my biggest fear is how do I become Emaan in the most authentic way while still having the support and presence and love from my parents and my family.
Yeah.
Like for instance, in high school, I dated. I had a boyfriend. I had to keep it a secret. I mean, I feel like my parents knew, and later they found out details. But I felt like I needed to have that experience. I needed to establish that connection. Same later on in life. I feel like I've always kind of gone against the grain. Like for instance, in our culture, our religion, it is against our religion for the woman to marry outside of the Muslim faith. And newsflash, I was married. I was once married. I met my ex-husband while in university, and he was a Christian man. And it was something that I really battled with my parents and my family. But it's something that I felt like I was in love and he was a good person. And it's something that I felt like I authentically had to do. And I think that that's something that's like a running theme in my life. Like even when I think of my life professionally, I made a whole business off of, some of the deepest, darkest days of my life that stemmed from an experience that I had with my health and my feminine health specifically. I think that that's something that's a running theme in my life is that it's very hard for me to not be authentically me and to share parts of me with those around me or, the world. And I think that, so when I was in college, I very sadly got diagnosed with cervical cancer. I decided I had been sexually active, which again is very haram for a young Muslim Arab girl. I'd been sexually active for some years. And I remember a friend saying to me, you should go to the gynecologist. Like I just got checked. You can go to the clinic. They won't report it on your insurance. And that was like the whole thing. It's like, okay, as long as my parents don't find out that this is the type of activity that that I've been doing, then cool. And it was a result of that very first gynecological exam that I was diagnosed with cervical cancer. I was 21 at the time.
Wow.
So quite young. And I just remember in that moment thinking like, I didn't even think of my health. I just remember thinking, how am I going to tell my parents this? And I didn't.
Yeah, that must have been a lot, like a weight on your shoulders.
Especially at such a young age as well.
It was. And I think that there was a lot of shame. There was like the parent piece, but then also, cervical cancer is often caused by HPV, which is a sexually transmitted virus. And at that age, at that time, I was very uneducated. Now I'm educated and I know, how it happens and the mechanics of it. But I think at the time I was very ashamed. I felt like I thought that I had brought this onto myself because of the things that I had chosen to do or the decisions that I made with my life. And so there was a shame and a fear, not telling my parents, but also not telling the people around me as well. So I really kept that to myself. And for the majority of my 20s, that's something that I had to deal with like treatment and staying on top of making sure that, my body was healthy.
What does that do to you, like mentally, emotionally, having to kind of essentially go through that on your own without, the support and stuff?
I think I've always had this like hyper independence, even from like a very young age. A very young age where I just kind of got on with things. And I think that can be a good thing at times and a bad thing at times. I'm very good at compartmentalizing, like putting it in a box and dealing with it only when I have to deal with it. And I think that's the way that I managed it. I would get sad or emotional, or I would have these times where I felt like this is impossible. But then I would take all those feelings, put it into a box and continue on. I mean, at the time, it was my senior year of college. I was about to like embark on the rest of my life. And I think to get a diagnosis like that, yes, it felt impossible, but I was lucky to have caught it early, to be able to, go through treatment that wasn't chemo. And I think that's really a turning point that happened in my life where I became very aware of my body, my health, educating myself on, not just the things that I was doing, but also like the products that I was using. And I mean, when you think about feminine hygiene products, like for years we've been hearing that tampons, pads, feminine wash are like filled with toxins and ingredients that are bad for you. And I think that's when I became like really, I won't even say curious. Like it was like a life kind of thing. Like I had to do my research because my body, my health depended on it.
Yeah. It's interesting. So coming from that and that experience that you've had, which was obviously very deep, very heavy, something beautiful came out of it. And that is Ketish. Although it came quite a few years later, it came off the back of the experiences that you've gone through and the journey that you decided to take on your life. So for those who don't know, can you just give us an insight to what Ketish is?
Yeah. So a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to launch my own brand. And I was really, I guess, like inspired or driven by my own health experiences, but also my cultural experiences. And I think it was coming here to this region and seeing that, if I grew up in the States where we had sex ed in biology class, where it's quite liberal to talk about these subjects, either amongst friends or you hear about it on TV, et cetera. Where I came to the region and I realized that there were a lot of women who are uneducated or do not have access to education and information on their feminine health specifically. And so, one day I had an idea to start a brand that would not only create products that were geared towards feminine and sexual health and products that were safe, effective, non-toxic that women can use. So think like hygiene type products, body care, sexual wellness products, but also coupling that with education in a community that, women can come to or could come to the space and learn and educate themselves on all things feminine health and sexual wellness.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And how did you spoke on the whole idea of, being like, a Muslim and, having to kind of keep things, to yourself, etc. Establish Ketish. Now you're loud with it, right?
You're the face of the brand as well.
Yeah. So I'm curious about that moment, like between you and say your family, where you went from the internal to the external, and you're like, this is who I am, and this is what I want to do, and how did those conversations go?
Yeah, I remember when I first. So the way Ketish kind of came about, at the time I was working for another female founder who started a beauty brand. And I was very lucky to kind of see her create this whole world. And she was of Arab descent, American Arab descent. And she created, a brand, an image, a community. And I was really inspired by what she created. So seeing that and seeing myself in her experience, that's what kind of gave me the initial push. When I started working on the brand, my parents were curious. Like, what do you mean you're going to start your own brand? Like, what is this brand? I'll never forget. I went to go visit them in California, and I was trying to explain to them what the brand was. And my dad asked, like, well, why this? Why feminine health? Why this? And at the time, I didn't tell them. Like, up until So I was diagnosed in 2009. I started working on Ketish in 2019. So like 10 years later. I did not launch the brand until the summer of 2021. And that's when I told my parents like the actual reason as
Just
to
before
why,
the launch.
like 3 weeks more. And I said to myself, okay, if I am going to launch this brand and be super vulnerable and open about my experiences and invite women to also have that same vulnerability, I need to share my story and share my experiences as to what brought me to this point. But I can't do that without telling my family first.
Yeah.
And it was tough. It was during COVID. I had to do it on Zoom.
Yeah.
And it was quite crushing. I think crushing on one hand because I think my parents were just shocked and surprised that something of that gravity could happen to their youngest daughter.
Yeah.
And that they were completely unaware. And I think what made me sad about that is I almost robbed my parents of their role to be there for me, to support me. And a lot of that came from like fear and shame and embarrassment. And I think that made them really sad.
Yeah.
I think the beautiful side or what kind of came out of it was it, and launching Ketish as a whole, it allowed my parents and I for the very first time to have a very open book in terms of our relationship, our ability to communicate about things. I think that they finally saw me as the whole person that I am right before I launched this brand.
Right before you showed the world.
Exactly. And I think it was scary for them as well. I think they were more worried for me. Launching a brand like this in the region it's tough. You don't, in the media and press, like you don't really talk about these things. And I think that they had a lot of fears. Like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure you really want to do this? I think they knew that there could be a lot of judgment that came from the community. And I said, yeah, I have to do this. And they supported me, and they still support me. They've supported me the whole way through. And so I'm very grateful for that.
So that's a lot of emotions you're carrying all at the same time. Starting a brand, me and Giovanni are just starting a brand. We're excited. There's that excitable energy, starting something new, especially something you're so passionate about. But then having that fear from your parents about the judgment element, life in general, obviously you have that sad element where you just feel like you've robbed your parents of what they're supposed to do for you. And then the rest of your life going on and all the other behind the scenes things while you're now smiling on camera and doing all these podcasts in Cosmo, Vogue, all of these great publications. But you also have a lot of other things going on. So can we delve into that a little bit? How did you juggle personal life and taking on the world just in general, as well as launching a brand at the same time?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. Recently, I've had to kind of take a step back and I really took a look at my life and all of the things that have happened over the last 4 years, 5 years, 10 years. And yeah, there's a lot that has happened behind the scenes. I think whenever you are stepping out and doing something on your own, it's terrifying. And no one can prepare you for how much work it takes, for how much courage you have to have, for how much stamina. Like every single day you have to wake up and encourage yourself to keep going and keep doing X and X and X while all of these other things are happening. I think with Ketish, what was tough is, in my personal life, I'm building this brand that is built off of like a very personal story, a very personal journey that I was sharing for the very first time with like my loved ones, but also the world. So that came with its own stressors. I also was going through, and a lot of people don't know this because I haven't really talked about it publicly. I was going through, like I had been in a 12-year relationship. I'd been in a 12-year relationship, and I was going through a huge transformation where I was kind of coming into my own. For 3 years, I was working on Ketish before I launched. And over the course of those 3 years, I think I became a different person. And I think my partner also became a different person because he had been working on his own thing too. And I think the politically correct term for like why we might have fallen apart was like our dreams kind of drove us apart. But I also feel like, I just realized that I wasn't the same person that I was 12 years ago. So like three weeks before I launched Ketish, we decided to get a divorce.
Wow.
And we had been separated and like trying and working on things. But that was also like a very big, I hate to say it this way, but a weight lifted. I almost felt like it was the last part of the old me being like removed in order for me to kind of really step into that next phase of life that then happened with Ketish, where I felt like I finally got to be my authentic self.
Yeah.
Both as like a woman and like a professional.
Yeah.
First of all, that's crazy. Like I didn't know that you were going through all of that at the same time. Like because it's a lot to juggle, right? But touching on Ketish, like what was the steps that you took to I guess set up this business in the Middle East and promote it, and it exploded, didn't it? How did that happen? You're getting featured in Cosmopolitan, Vogue, etc. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I had investors, and my investors had also established their own brands in the past and became wildly successful and wildly popular because of it. And I am grateful for, one, having the example, and two, having the faith in me and believing in a project like Ketish. I think it's rather tough to go to the investment table and say, hey, like I want your money to be able to launch this very taboo brand in a space that I don't know how it's going to be received. And I'm grateful for the support that was poured into it. And a part of the investment was this infrastructure where, a team and guidance and mentorship. And I think that really helped kind of put the building blocks together. I also came from a product development background. So professionally, I'd always been in the beauty industry. I went from an operations background to then more of a creative background where I worked on actually building products. So I got to bring that expertise to the table, but there was a lot of guidance and support on all of the other elements. And when we launched Ketish, I think that's something that was quite surprising was the amount of support that we got. I prepared myself for the worst. We had like a contingency plan, like if we're shut down or if people block us from being able to post and this and that, which happened, what were we going to do? But I was quite surprised, like even right at the launch, the amount of publications that featured us. We were the first feminine wellness brand to launch in Sephora Middle East.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Which was a very full circle moment, I think, for me. I think we launched in Sephora Middle East 5 years to the day that I quit my job at Sephora in the US.
It's like a full circle, isn't it?
That is really full circle,
and it was great. Unfortunately, and I know I've talked about this publicly before, but unfortunately, Ketish kind of came to a screeching halt. A lot of it was out of my control, and I think that there was just a misalignment in terms of where we saw the brand going and what we wanted for the brand internally. And so, I think that also was a soul-crushing blow that was not expected or anticipated. But I'm really grateful for all that kind of came with it in terms of learnings.
Well, it sounds like a journey you've been on, honestly, from the full circle moment, the excitement of launching a brand, as well as the whole sensitivity behind your actual story and needing to tell your family and going through a divorce and all of this. So you've done all of this, you've launched this amazing brand, and it comes to a screeching halt. And it's not just a brand to make money. This is a passion. This is something that you believe in. And it's something where you said you're building a community to support others, other people in your situation that don't get to hear about feminine health enough and do need that support and guidance. So what you created was absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
I can't even begin to imagine how heartbreaking it would have been that out of your control, it's come to a screeching halt. So how did you then manage that separation? Like, you had your brand, you've built your baby, you've let go of this old Emaan, and you're stepping into Emaan Abbas now, but now it's been taken from you. So how did you manage that?
Girl, I'm still trying to manage it. No, it was a very hard time of my life. I've said this a number of times to like my close friends. I probably cried and felt the devastation of the closure of Ketish far deeper than like even my divorce. Like I cried about it a lot more. Sorry, not that wasn't important, but I think I grieved that very differently, and I grieved it over a long period of time. Where with Ketish and its closure, I think because it was out of my hands and out of my control, and it was done in such a unnecessarily traumatic way, it added its own layer of just it was very, very hard. And I think I remember waking up like a few days later in the aftermath and just thinking like, who am I now? Which is so sad to even say. For the last 2 or 3 years, I was the founder of Ketish. Who am I now? And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had poured so much of myself into the brand. Like I really, whether it was the brand identity, our brand voice, the products we built, everything, the imagery, the content that we created, like it really came from like the depths of my soul. And it was really tough. And I think the biggest learning and what I kind of have carried from that whole experience is that you shouldn't tie your worth to, or your identity to something that is so tangible, something that can fall apart in a second. And just because it falls apart does not mean that it's all lost. Like you built that, you created that, you did that, check, check, check. Although you're still not doing that, it doesn't diminish, one, all you've done, and two, who you are and what you can continue to do. And I was reminded of that. I think that in this whole experience, I've seen a very dark side when it comes to business and the way things can and should be handled, or can and are handled. And I've also seen a very supportive, inspiring, encouraging side of business, specifically with women in business. I've been very lucky to have these guardian angels that often pull me aside and remind me of who the fuck I am. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
It's good. That's really good.
And I think I needed that. I think for a long time, I kind of have stayed in the shadows. I've taken the time to kind of lick my wounds. And over the course of the last year and a half that I've been doing that, I've had women, specifically women in my life, that have kind of propped me up alongside them and said, nah, we got to keep going. You did it once, you can do it again. And I'm very grateful for those people, because I think I needed to have my faith restored in, specifically when it came to like women in business.
On that topic of like women in business, and obviously, I appreciate there's probably certain things that you might not be able to divulge But what would you say from a business point of view are sort of lessons that you learned in that whole process, you know, with Ketish? Because it sounds like to me it was your baby, you created it, but it sounds almost as if like you didn't have the authority to then continue with it even after you found out whatever it was you found out. I'm asking this question in a certain way so that you can tell us as much or as little, but in terms of, I'm sure there's like a professional lesson that was learned there as well. It would be great if you could share some of those lessons.
Yeah. First and foremost, get it in writing.
Yeah.
Get it all in writing. Get it in writing. Get it in writing, getting in writing.
This is, the lawyer in me is like, yeah, you know.
Which, and I think, yes, get it in writing and make sure that it's ironclad. I also think the biggest learning in all of this has a lot to do with remembering your worth and knowing when a situation or a partnership or a circumstance is meeting you where you are and when it's not.
Yeah.
Having firm boundaries that are in alignment with that, like knowing what you bring to the table, knowing what should or should not be honored in a business deal, or even like a job, you know, when you go and you interview and you're told, okay, here's what the salary is. Like, is that in alignment with what it is that you're bringing to the table? And not having fears with saying no.
Yeah.
Being able to pump the brakes when you feel like things are out of alignment or people are not respecting your worth and what you bring to the table professionally. I say this even like when it comes to professionally, but also in relationships, friendships, like this applies. And ensuring that people respect that. And if they don't, not being afraid of walking away. Whatever opportunity that is meant for you is not going to pass you by. And the more you kind of try to fit a square into a round hole, the more it's going to fall apart. And I think in my experience with Ketish, there were a lot of situations that happened along the way that I had a lot of fears around saying no or going along with things without really anticipating or knowing, you know, the repercussions of that. And they weren't always in alignment with what I deserved as a founder and a professional, really.
Yeah.
And I guess all of that experience you've carried with you now to, you know, doing what it is you're doing today, you know, and I'm sure there's certain situations that perhaps you put yourself in now where you kind of know, actually, this is what I want and this is what I stand for and this is the direction that anything I'm associated with is going in.
Yeah.
So how did you find like your magic? Because I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with you. We all get scared. We all feel fear. We all get afraid, especially if you're starting something new. And you say like, you know, put your boundaries in place, but it's easier said than done, regardless of the situation, professional or relationship. So how did you find your magic to break out of the boxes that you put yourself in and that other people put you in?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that thing that my mom said when I was little. Like, I really had to touch the fire to feel it burn. And I might like dabble in the fire again. Just because I'm like that. But I think I had to learn the lesson in that way in order to never make those mistakes again. And I don't wish it upon anyone. Like, I wish someone would I could sit someone down and say, don't do this and don't do this and don't do this. And maybe some people will follow based off of what you say. But I think for me, I had to go through the experience to really understand, you know, what does protecting yourself look like? What do your boundaries look like? How do you honor yourself in every type of situation, but honoring yourself professionally as well? And I think that that's something that you said, where do you find your magic? I think I'm still learning that. And I'm very lucky. Like I came out of the situation with Ketish. I've taken some time to, again, lick my wounds and things just kind of started falling into place where people would reach out. They knew what I did with Ketish, and they started reaching out and saying like, hey, I'm interested in starting a brand. Like, can you give me advice? Or where do I go to build these types of products? And I think it worked out twofold. Like now I have a whole business where I now support other founders and other brands, other founders that are building brands of impact and want to create brands or products that help them, bring their vision to life. But I also think that they helped me. They helped me remember who I was and what I am capable of. And so it's been a very healing journey. Now just like taking a step back and kind of helping other founders not experience the things that I had experienced and helping them create their dreams and making them come to life.
Yeah, no, I hear that. On that, like, I've got a question for you. In terms of like the whole battle of, do you take this investment if they're, you see like something like Dragon's Den or whatever, and it's like, okay, they're willing to invest X, Y, Z, but they want the business to go in one direction. It can be so hard for like an entrepreneur who, without this investment, their business might not see the light of day, Is there a rule for when you should take it, or how does one navigate that decision? Because, like on the one hand, you get the investment and, you get the publicity, you get the product out there, etc. But at the same time, if it doesn't represent what it is that you want it to represent, is it worth it?
Yeah. It's so hard because honestly, going into business with someone or having an investor, it really is like a marriage. It's actually worse. It's actually far worse and far more complicated. And if it ends horribly, like it is worse than a divorce. I can attest to that. And so I think the advice that I would give is do your research, know who it is that you're going into business with. It is okay. Just like you go to an investor and you sell them your business and they ask you all these questions, it is okay to also take a step back and ask your questions and ask people that have maybe worked with them in the past so that you can get a better sense and a feeling for what it is that you're walking into. So I think like that's the first piece of advice. Do your research. I also think aligning yourself, knowing that investment is not just about money. Yes, money is, it makes the world go round, makes a business go round. But if you are choosing to bring an investor on, what else do they come with? And does it fill in the gaps of what it is that you're missing? For instance, if I'm a creative person and I know all of the creative pieces and I know what I want my brand to look and feel like and kind of come together and I have that down lock, but I don't really have the operational background or I don't have the finance background or I don't have the connections that are going to help me get into X and X and X retailer, does that investor come with that expertise? And do they help you kind of fill in those gaps? And I think that that's another way that you could say like, okay, check, this is the right person that I should be teaming up with. I also think, and this might be like an unpopular opinion, although business should be built on like numbers and facts and X and X, it's also a lot of intuition and listening to your gut. And I think that that's something that I've also had to, it's been a hard learning for me is, did you listen to your gut? Did you listen to the little voice inside of you that said, this doesn't feel right, or I don't get the best energy from this person? And oftentimes when I look back, like those were the indicators that I ignored. And so I would encourage founders, like as they're going into these conversations, like drown out the noise, listen to the little voice, because it's probably going to steer you in the right direction.
So there's red flags in business too.
Yes, a lot of them. A lot of them. But if I were to go back and do it again, yes, I would do it 100%. I would do it differently. I don't know if I would take investors on. But then again, looking at Ketish, like we did not become what we became so quickly without it. So it's tough. It's tough. It really has to be the right person. And you'll know.
Yeah. The little voice will tell you.
It will. And maybe it'll tell you and then you'll ignore it. And then
if it sounds too good to be true, it's almost like, you know, like,
probably
like when you go on a date and if it's like, oh, wait a minute, you tick all these boxes?
Yeah.
Like, what are you hiding?
Yeah. When's the shoe gonna drop?
Yeah.
Trust, it does. It drops. But that's where like the protection piece also comes from, like setting yourself up to where you're protected and you have things, you know, lined up in a way that like, if something does go wrong, God forbid, you have those things to fall back on both ends, the investor side as well as the founder, brand owner side. Yeah.
Well, now you've been through this whole journey and where you are today, you're able to spread this wisdom to help so many other founders, which is amazing. And going on this whole Emaan journey, being in the lowest of lows multiple times in your life now, having to go through so many different trials and tribulations to where you are now to help so many different people and their businesses, and then obviously impact other people who are able to benefit from those businesses. It's truly amazing. I'm sure you use that little voice inside of you to be able to pick who actually you want to work with now, which is great. But now, how has all of this chain of events affected your personal life now? Because there's still that balance. Like it's difficult because people want to know about business and everyone comes on podcasts or talks individually and professionally and business is hard and growing your own business and brand and just working in general can be really difficult, but also like personal life can be very difficult too. So to encompass the two together, and now it sounds like your career is going really well. Does that mean it's had a positive impact on your personal life?
Yeah, I think, just in the last year and a half, like Ketish came to a close in January of 2023, which also a lot of people don't know that, because a lot of things were happening behind the scenes, and it was tough, even before it got shut down. Like we had been going through a challenging period behind the scenes as we were building and launching the brand. And so a lot of my energy was kind of poured into that. I literally had no personal life. I mean, I had friends and I would go do things, but like everything was kind of shaped and molded around Ketish. I think in the last year and a half, I've had moments where things have happened to kind of check me and make me realize that like life is so much bigger than, you know, this beautiful brand that you built, but life is meant to be lived.
Yeah.
And so I try to remember that every day. And even in the hard days where I'm like struggling or I'm not having the same motivation that I had, you know, a week ago, I try to remember those things. I had a moment last year, and it was after everything kind of burnt to the ground with Ketish. And I also was going through some personal stuff where my dad got very sick. He had a heart attack and he was in the hospital for about 2 months. And I was going through a bunch of legal stuff as well. And it was crazy. Like life has a very, I think in my life, it has a very in your face way of trying to tell me something, like trying to teach me the lesson. And there was one day in August of last year where I was in a legal case. And on that day, I found out that I lost the case. And 45 minutes later, I get a call we get the call from the hospital that my dad was going to be discharged. And it was like the first day that he was going to be able to like come home and, like stand up and hug us for the first time in 2 months after we thought we were going to lose him. Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
And that's like all I needed was that moment to remind me that like, life is so much more important than this ugly chapter that really just needed to close. And from here on out, it's like the universe was just trying to remind me of like what was truly important. And so I've kind of taken that and now applied that to everywhere in my life. Like if it's not speaking to my soul, whether it's like a business, a brand idea, if I'm on a date, which I don't go on many, I'm not gonna lie, or if I'm spending time with friends, if I'm on a trip, like if it's not speaking to my soul and moving me in a meaningful way, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna pour myself into anything that isn't mine. And so, yeah, I had to learn it in a tough way, but I'm happy that I got that lesson. And I think that that's probably how my personal life has completely transformed is I now have one.
Yeah.
I have balance, or I try to honor that balance as much as possible.
First of all, I'm so glad.
Sorry.
I'm so happy to hear that your father is doing really well now.
Thank you.
And on the mend and walking, talking.
Hugging.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. And so sassy. It's like, I don't know what happened after the surgery, but it's like the sassy side of him came out. And I was like, that's where I get it, I think.
I love that.
That's absolutely great. I bet like your quality of life now is probably like 10 times better. You know, we were speaking just before and you was like, you're able to go to the gym and, I guess because your mind is probably, it weans out the crap basically and, focuses on what it needs to focus on and stuff. So yeah.
I'm doing a much better job of honoring the things that mean something to me, whether it's time spent with the people I love or, getting on a gym routine and sticking with it. Like consistency is key in anything that you do, whether it's relationship building, brand building. And so, those are the things that I try to pour myself into, or the things that are going to pour themselves back into me too. So.
Yeah. No, I love that. Emaan, we have like a tradition on our podcast, right?
Another one.
Yeah. So we have two. So you have the one at the beginning and we have one towards the end of the podcast. And we ask all our guests the same question. So we're going to ask you it now. Okay. And if you could implement one rule for everyone in the world to follow, what would it be and why?
I know this is like so cliche, but just be kind.
I love that.
Yeah. And do things with kindness. You never know what someone's going through.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I pride myself on is I try to walk into every experience, every interaction, whether it's, a delivery guy or the lady who does my hair or a CEO that's mentoring me. I try to walk into every situation with kindness and authenticity. And I try to leave people better than where I found them. And sometimes we're having a bad day and we don't always do that, but I try my hardest to kind of embody that. And I don't know, I just feel like the world would be a better place if people were just kind and considerate of others and had empathy. Same. Not everyone has empathy. It's wild.
Yeah, it's actually mad.
It's actually gross. Like how ugly. Ugh. So be kind. Yeah. Would be my rule.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. It's been great.
You've definitely left us in a better place.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. No,
thank you guys.
And thank you for being so, open and vulnerable with us and, telling like your truth, your story. And, it's great to hear and stuff.
I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with so many different things you've said and hopefully take some of the nuggets that you've given them to implement in their own lives to see the good in the world.
Thank you.
Amongst the crap.
And thank you guys for building a space where people like me can tell their stories and share very authentically and candidly and have tears involved. I'm really happy. I'm happy I had this time with you guys.
We are sure you have lots in the pipeline because that's who you are.
Touching the fire. She don't stop.
Where can people follow you?
I'm on Instagram. I really want to start. I love TikTok.
Yeah.
I love TikTok.
I think you'd be great on TikTok. I think I can see you I can see you blowing up on
Yeah.
TikTok.
I really like, I have to limit, I call it TikTok time, and I have to limit myself. I'm that millennial. I would really love to launch a TikTok. So who knows? Couldn't find it, my name on there is, they call me Emaan. I don't have great content, but look out for me. I might be on TikTok soon.
Go viral
Fantastic.
soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank
Well,
you
thanks
so
for coming.
much.
Been appreciated.
Thank you.